Well, this video is to make up for the webinar that experienced technical difficulties on January 29th, 2020. So, hello, my name is Philip Roth. Thank you for watching this video on Smarter Transit with Google Maps. The focus of the webinar is actually going to be on something called the General Transit Feed Specification, which is used by Google Maps and other applications to read your transit agency's schedule data and display the results in a query that made by a potential customer. In my experience, I've found that GTFS is a relatively low-cost method for communicating your route schedules to your customers. If you're a transit agency that's considering whether to pursue having your schedule data being hosted for these types of applications, my main goal is to give you the information that you need to make that decision. Other interested viewers are, of course, welcome. Today's video assumes that you have no working knowledge of GTFS. You may or may not be familiar with transit trip building either. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I'm a staff member of American Structure Point, which is an engineering, architecture, and city planning firm headquartered in Indianapolis with offices all over Indiana and Ohio. Pardon me. My entire professional career has been spent as a city planner, and I've worked for over 25 years for a variety of public and private organizations, including the Central Indiana Regional Transportation Authority. It was there that I learned about and applied GTFS to several transit systems, including routes that CERTA directly operated, as well as systems in Johnson County and Shelbyville, Indiana. I'll start off by giving a brief description of what GTFS is and what it isn't. I'll then show some of the third-party applications that use GTFS, highlighting how they can be useful to your customer base. We'll then transition into what it takes to format and upload your scheduled data in this format. What are the hardware and software requirements, skill sets, etc. After that, I'll open it up for Q&A. Obviously, we're not going to be able to cover everything about GTFS in this video, but my hope is that by the end of it, you're informed on what it takes to implement GTFS for your organization and whether it might be right for you. So, what is GTFS? Really, it's nothing more than a common format for converting a transit agency's schedule and stop data into a form that can be used by some cloud-based or third-party application. The routes, stops, and times are coded so that the data is accessible for some third-party developer. Because the information being coded is the regular scheduled stop time for the service, GTFS has primarily been used for fixed route service. It's possible to apply GTFS to other types of service, and I'll show you some examples as we go through. The specification or coding format doesn't make any strenuous hardware or software demands. In the end, the specification consists of a series of text files. You may find it advantageous to use something over and above a simple text editor, however, which I will come back to later. Once completed, an agency's GTFS data is uploaded to a host site where it can be read by third-party applications. Most of these applications are trip planners, similar to the one found on the Google Maps site. There are a couple of other ancillary applications that use GTFS data, and I'll elaborate on those in a few minutes. Once the link between the application and the agency's data is complete, the application can apply the agency's data in a variety of customer queries. This slide shows what the data looks like in the Google Maps Trip Builder application. And if you've ever used the Google Maps Trip Builder before, you may notice that there are some icons at the top, and that one of these looks like a train. That is the transit option for the Trip Builder. And if you click on it, it'll show you the transit options to connect points A and B. Now, this is a trip that I often got phone calls for when I was working at CERTA, connecting the Indianapolis Downtown Transit Center on the East End to an Amazon fulfillment center in Plainfield. And one of the neat things about this example is that it involves two separate systems. To the east, it involves the Indianapolis system, locally known as Indigo, and to the west, it involves CERTA's system, which I oversaw. The trip builder automatically knew to use the data from both of these agencies to build a trip plan for this particular origin and destination pair, even though the agencies separately developed and uploaded their scheduled data. To the left here, you can see the details of the trip plan, which include a little bit of a walk at the destination end, about an 8-minute or half-a-mile walk estimated by the application, as well as some contact information at the bottom so that the customer knows who to contact if there are any difficulties or have any further questions. Now, even when you're dealing with a single system, you still may decide that the Google Trip Builder application provides results that are superior to that of a map. In this example, I'm showing an origin and destination pair that's wholly within the Indianapolis system, but for which there are multiple options available. And the customer may have different needs. For example, these 3 different options have different walking lengths at the end of the trip. They have different travel times. They have different arrival times. And in fact, you can filter the responses by specifying the earliest departure time or latest arrival time for a particular activity need. Now, if you click on the Schedule Explorer at the bottom, you can see additional options, and you also have the same options for filtering your results up at the top. Now, I want to emphasize that the Google Maps Trip Planner, Trip Builder, is one example of an application that uses an agency's GTFS data. There are many trip building or applications that operate similarly. The Google one is, I believe, the most popular. And second, these applications are using your scheduled data. The data is not real-time. There is a companion specification called GTFS Real-Time, fittingly enough, that allows for applications to display the actual location of vehicles if they're adequately equipped or appropriately equipped. This topic is going to go beyond the scope of this video, however. GTFS data is also used in the base Google Maps. If you zoom into a certain level in certain cities, you can see bus stop icons. These icons, the location is specified in the GTFS data. Even though there's no trip being built by the map application, it's still showing the stops based upon where the GTFS location, stop locations are specified. And this can be useful to a customer for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is choosing among different options for a particular trip, say to a pharmacy, based on the accessibility to transit. Here are some examples of other things that use GTFS data if you upload it to a publicly available site. The BrailleNote Sendero is an application that uses a refreshable Braille display to use GTFS data or put the GTFS data in a format that's usable by visually impaired or blind persons. Outer Spatial is a website/app that relies upon mashups. Mashups are web maps that combine data from a variety of sources. In the case of Outer Spatial, it is a site for identifying outdoor recreational opportunities. And if your community has transit data uploaded to in a GTFS format, one of the data layers that the mashup will show is transit accessibility, so that if someone wants to go for a hike in your community, they can see hiking opportunities, trailhead opportunities that are close to transit stops. Transit Screen is a provider of public transportation information displays. They're often used at transit centers, and their products can use GTFS data in showing scheduled departure and arrival times. Now remember that the data are not real time, so up-to-date arrival information is not available through GTFS, although there may be other ways to include that in a display such as this. Now if you're thinking of publishing your schedule in GTFS or publishing your schedule, and you think that printing it and developing it in hard copy and in GTFS is duplicative, well, the Timetable Publisher, which is an open source application, can take your GTFS data and publish your hard copy schedule. Several large agencies, including TriMet of Portland, Oregon, use this application for this purpose. A final application that was developed by the University of Florida is the Travel Assistance Device, or TAD, which is used by visually impaired or developmentally disabled people who have difficulty otherwise navigating a transit system. Like Google Map Trip Builder, you use the TAD to build a trip plan. However, as you progress along your journey, the TAD app compares your smartphone's location to that of your desired destination, prompting you when to pull the cord to get off the bus. So these are just a few of the examples that use GTFS. GTFS has been around for about 15 years. It's a result of a collaboration between Portland TriMet, the transit agency for the Portland region, and Google. The legend is that the operations planner at TriMet was frustrated following a trip to other cities and in trying to figure out their transit systems, and came back home and sent some inquiries out to various agencies, including Google, about how to include transit in trip building applications. Google had already been working on something, but was encountering difficulty in how to encode relevant parts of information. So the two agencies got together and collaborated on the development of the specification. It started to be more widely adopted, slowly at first, but then it took off. Now, it used to be called the Google Transit Specification, Google Feed Transit Specification. In 2010, they changed it to they changed the word Google to General, and that has stuck ever since. So to the agency, GTFS simply looks like a set of text files. Here's what they look like in a folder on your computer. Now, the files have standard names, And part of the proper coding of a route system in GTFS format involves making sure that each file maintains its proper name and has the correct elements. So you cannot change these names. Now, for the other two windows on this slide, I took the stops.txt file and opened it up, first in a text editor that comes with Microsoft Windows, Microsoft Notepad, and then in Microsoft Excel. In the text editor, you can see a lot of commas, and those commas indicate the spacing for items within a spreadsheet. This is called a comma-separated value format, and it's a way of putting a spreadsheet into a text file. When you open it up into a text editor like Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets, the application automatically reads the commas as separators for columns. So it's a lot easier to work with. In addition to keeping the names of the files consistent, you also have to be consistent about how you name the elements of your system. The table on the left, or the figure on the left, is showing what kinds of consistency you need to keep between different tables or different components of the specification. On the tables to the right, I'm showing some examples of this. I'm showing the routes table at the top here. I'm showing the trips table. Oh, excuse me, this is the trips table. Excuse me, this is the trips table. I'm showing the stop times table here, and I'm showing the stops table here. And you'll notice that the stop times table has a couple of variables, and the specification needs to match observations in each of the other tables. If this doesn't get transferred over properly, when you upload the specification, it will not work properly. In IT, this is called a relational database. So the main workhorse table is this stop times table, and it will be the largest of each of the tables that you have. Each trip or run of a vehicle on a route is associated with each stop and has an arrival and departure time. So the number of rows you have in this table is equal to the number of trips, which is equal to the number of routes times the number of times each day that each route runs, times the number of stops. This particular example is coming from Athens, Georgia, which has a 15-route system. And as you can see, there are quite a few, when you get up there, quite a few observations in this table. There are actually a total of 5,500. So populating this table is the main challenge with doing a GTFS for your system, and it's the reason that if you have a larger system, it might be worthwhile to invest in some kind of application that'll do it for you. For our purposes, for smaller agencies, this is a much more manageable table. Now I want to pause and make sure that we understand what GTFS isn't. GTFS is not a real-time transit vehicle locator. We've already mentioned that. It just uses scheduled information. Now, if you're interested in showing the locations of your vehicles online, there is a companion specification called GTFS Real-Time, which can use that information. Again, that's not what this particular specification is for. It's also not a planning or cutting application. It's not intended to develop a route based upon parameters that you have inputted. And it's not a scheduler for on-demand service. You need to have regularly scheduled service in order for this to be most effective. Now, there are some ways to apply it for something other than fixed route service. I mean, fixed route is the most direct application. I'm showing on this slide 3 types of flexible service in the 2 figures. The first are these flag stops. And if you have a system that utilizes flag stops, you will have to manually enter representative stop locations probably about every block. And that will allow your customers' queries to show the transit system as an option and provide the greatest degree of accuracy in helping the customer plan their trip. Another type of flexible service is deviated fixed route service, where the bus makes a regularly scheduled trip from point A to point B, but along the journey is making short-term deviations from that fixed route to accommodate passenger requests that are either called in, submitted online, or are given to the driver when the passenger boards the bus. When you code GTFS for a deviated fixed route system, be advised that it will still show up as a fixed route system. It's not going to show the potential for deviations. So that is a potential handicap when displaying deviated routes with the GTFS specification. The third type of flexible service is deviated point. It's like deviated route in that it deviates to serve passenger requests. The difference is that there's no snap back to a route. Instead, the vehicle is choosing the shortest path between customer requests. Again, be advised that if you choose to apply GTFS for this route, the route is still going to show up as on Google Maps or other applications as a fixed direct route. And you have to be the judge yourself of whether that's potentially misleading for your customers. Now, you can code in on-demand service. Doing that means that you'll be creating a set of representative stops, abstract stops within your service area that when people query whether a trip is possible, you will it'll show those representative stops, and a flag will come up saying, please call this agency to schedule this trip. Now, again, you will have to judge for yourself the degree to which coding the data and including it online in this fashion is potentially misleading for the here's an example of deviated fixed route service in Johnson County, which is just to the south of Indianapolis. This involves 3 routes within a single system. It involves a circulator on the Franklin end. It involves a directional route and then it involves a circulator on the Greenwood end. And all of these routes are deviated fixed route. These little blips by here are turning off of the main roadway to accommodate a stop. These are not, I repeat, these are not deviations. So I'm just highlighting again the fact that deviations are not shown when the route is displayed, even though a person making this trip may have to wait through one or two deviations before he or she gets to her destination. Here's an example, or here's a list of the types of data that GTFS requires. Your agency info is used, for example, in the Google Maps application as a way to let the customer know where they need to contact for more information and how, if you have a fare, how much it is. The calendar data tells the system what days of the week the service is going to run, and whether you have reduced service on holidays, and if so, how it's reduced. The stop data is the data collection item, which is likely going to take the longest amount of time because you have to collect latitude, longitudes, points, XY coordinates for each of the stops and for your route data as well. And then the route data, there are points that indicate the where the route is and what streets it travels on, and that's how the route is displayed in Google Maps. Now, as I mentioned, all you really need is a text editor, but it really is easier to use to develop the specification to code your data using some kind of a spreadsheet program, Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets being two examples. If you're wondering how to get latitude or longitude information for your stops, there are GPS apps that a typical smartphone can use, and I'll show you an example in a moment. And then finally, to do quality control and make sure that you're correctly getting the locations you thought, a GIS system is somewhat helpful. I'll show you a free version in just a minute. Just be advised, using a GIS, that there can be a bit of a learning curve for the software, so you may or may not choose to use it. Here's the GPS app that I use on my smartphone. It's called GPS Logger. It's free, and it automatically shows you the latitude and longitude location of where you are. What I typically do when I'm using one for a transit or even for an automobile journey is I simply click on a start logging, and it writes every 10 seconds. It'll write the latitude and longitude of where I am to a text file that I can later download. So here's an example of a trip I took, not in transit obviously. This line here is actually a series of points representing 10-second intervals. Here's a close-up of what that looks like on the origin end. And then here is what the text file looks like when you download it and open it up in Excel. Got the XY coordinates. Elevation, that's kind of fun to think about, but it's not as useful. Now, to display those, the maps I just showed you were actually developed with the free GIS tool called QGIS. You can download this for free. It's open source. It's something that's available for your use to get a sense of whether your geographic data have been correctly collected and what kind of oddities there might be in the data, etc. Now, as far as the putting all the pieces together, your general sequence of tasks to implement GTFS is to collect the data, and that includes going out in the field possibly and getting the coordinates through that data logger, GPS logger app for your stops and your routes, getting your scheduled data associated with your stop data, getting that formatted, and then entering the information into the standardly named text files that I mentioned a moment ago. Again, I would recommend doing this in Excel. At the end, though, you have to export everything to those text files, and then after you compress them in a table to make sure that it's a single file, you upload it to a host, and there are several free options for hosting your GTFS data. And then if you want it to be active in Google Maps, you have to create a Google account for your agency, not for you, but for your agency. And then once you register, you can tell Google Maps where to look, namely the place where you uploaded it to, in order to use the data for customer queries. That is all I have on this. I apologize that this is a PowerPoint video and not the actual live video. At any rate, please feel free to contact me with any questions on this or other topics. I've enjoyed presenting, and I hope to hear from all of you who are listening to this at some point in the future. Take care. Bye-bye.